2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll go one step further. I'm outraged. I think by the administration going to the United Nations before we actually have a chance to even read the document and go forward in these discussions in a good faith, bipartisan manner, we're showing the world that we don't stand together right now. And that's what this is all about. That's why we fought for the last few months in this committee. And I'm so encouraged that we ended up with a unanimous vote in this committee and a 98-1 vote in the Senate to go back to the balance of power between the legislative and the executive branch. I'm encouraged that Senator King is here, sitting here for 4 hours, 3 hours this morning, 4 hours almost, listening to this. People are involved in this, Senator and Mr. Secretary, and I appreciate what you guys have done. This is a yeoman's job you've had, a huge task. Mr. Secretary, you've played hurt the last few months in this thing. Thank you for all your effort. I personally have tried to take a very measured approach in this, to try and understand the issues, to try and understand what we were trying to achieve. I've heard Secretary of State say that our goal is to preclude Iran from ever becoming a nuclear weapon state. But I'm very troubled today. I'm look at this somewhat skeptical because of the Mr. Lew, our Secretary Lew, I'm not sure what I said was humorous, but and let me just read you a couple of quotes here. This agreement will help to achieve a long-standing and vital American objective, an end to the threat of nuclear proliferation. 1994, President Bill Clinton. President Obama, Iran will never be permitted to develop a nuclear weapon. President Clinton, compliance will be certified by the International Atomic Energy Agency. President Obama, what we're going to do is setting up a mechanism whereby, yes, IAEA inspectors can go any place. President Clinton, this agreement represents the first step on a road to a nuclear-free Korean peninsula. President Obama, this framework would cut off every pathway that Iran could possibly take to develop a nuclear weapon. I'm unsettled because we've had bad experiences dealing with bad actors. If I look at this today, I hear, Secretary of State, you said something today I haven't heard you say before, and I want to dial into this. We're guaranteeing they won't have a nuclear weapon. I know that's our goal. But I've read every page of this document. I've seen the classified documents. I'm very concerned that as I read this, the deal, I understand our objective, I understand their intent, our commitment is to never allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. My question, Secretary Kerry, again is, does this deal actually preclude Iran from becoming a nuclear weapon state?
Senator, first of all, I really appreciate your approach to this, and I very much appreciate your comments. I know you're taking this very, very seriously, as are other senators, and I want to speak specifically to your several concerns. First of all, I believe, I spent 29 years here in this committee back in the early days of the MX missile debates and INF in Europe and SALT and START and so forth. This, I believe, is one of the most extensive agreements with the most extensive access provisions and accountability standards I've seen in the time that I was here. And I believe we have put in place a highly distinguishable set of measures from North Korea. Now, first of all, North Korea, during the 8 years of the Clinton administration, they didn't gain 1 ounce of plutonium capacity. What they did was they started cheating on the HEU, highly enriched uranium path. And the framework was put in place, and the administrations changed. And the new administration came in with a different attitude about sort of how to approach them. But with the discovery of the cheating on the HEU, they immediately shut down the diplomatic track, and North Korea pulled out of the NPT, fully pulled out of the NPT. There were no inspections. Nothing else was happening. And yes, they blew up several nuclear weapons, and they developed their nuclear capacity. That should be a warning to everybody here about why what we have, in fact, put in place is so important and ought to be embraced. Because unlike North Korea, the North Korea experience is what gave birth to the additional protocol.
Senator Kerry, I apologize.
Okay. I just want you to know, though, Senator, the additional protocol came into existence to remedy the deficit of what happened with North Korea. So the access we have here, we never had in North Korea. We have unprecedented ability to hold Iran accountable. And I believe through the myriad of access, civil nuclear program, 24/7 access to their declared facilities, we will know instantaneously if they try to move to higher.
I understand, and I heard you say that last night. I appreciate that. If they do, we'll know. But does this deal, does this agreement preclude Iran from becoming a nuclear weapon state, the deal itself?
I believe if the agreement is fully implemented, and obviously if Iran lives by it, yes.
Thank you. Secretary Liu, with regard to the options, what brought Iran to the negotiating table recently? What's their motive for coming and negotiating in the first place?
Senator, I'm not sure I could tell you the specific thing, but we look at the impact of the sanctions over the last number of years. It's crushed Iran's economy. It's crushed it in every way.
Reduced it about 20%.
Yeah, the size of the economy is down. The exchange rate is terrible. The unemployment and inflation rates are sky high.
So, excuse me, the concern I have then is in the very beginning when they came to the table, we ceded to them the right to enrich, the right to potentially bypass 18 countries who are good actors on the world stage, and join an elite group of 5 countries that actually have civil nuclear programs but do not enrich. Now, there are 9, as I understand it, 9 countries that actually have nuclear weapons, 5 in the NPT, 4 out of the NPT. They obviously have civil programs. They obviously enrich. But the delineation here between the countries that are good players, Germany, Brazil, Afghanistan, or I'm sorry, Argentina, Holland, Japan, we're putting Iran into that group, a bad actor like Iran. My question is, what the option that I see to this is potentially doubling down on the sanctions that got them to the table in the first place. I'd like you to respond to that. We know it was crushing their economy. We know it was having a tremendous impact on their regime. And my question is that not a viable option today as we look at alternatives to the deal itself?
You know, Senator, I think the reason the sanctions have had the powerful effect is that they're not just U.S. sanctions, they've been international sanctions, and that requires keeping an international coalition together to impose the kinds of tough sanctions that we've had. You know, in past debates over U.S. sanctions, we've gone back and forth with the Congress saying, if you do more and it keeps other countries out, then we're in the end doing less. And I think we've come to a good place on each of the rounds of discussions over sanctions to grow the coalition in the world. If this deal is rejected, the other partners who've helped us to impose those sanctions will not be of like mind.
Of the $115 billion that you've identified, and I understand the nuances of the different categories of that cash, how much is that relative to our tertiary, our secondary rather, sanctions on other countries dealing with Iran versus the EU and other players on the P5+1?
I would have to go back and look at the numbers, but these are Iran's resources.
I understand, but I'm trying to make the delineation here between what are the sanctions, what percentage of the 115 is due to U.S. sanctions, congressional sanctions, versus the P5+1 or the...
Yeah, it's kind of hard to disaggregate because our sanctions are as effective as they are because we get the cooperation of other countries. And I can tell you, as have the other secretaries at this table, we have had for years now ongoing discussions where it's getting harder and harder to keep countries tied to the oil sanctions, for example, because it's hard on their economies. They've been willing to do it because the goal of the sanctions was to get Iran to the negotiating table. Query, would they be willing to do it if Iran came to the negotiating table and we rejected a deal that all of the other countries in the P5+1 have signed on to? That's where our sanctions ability starts to fray.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.